Welcome, everyone, to Creating a Family. Today we're going to be talking about, or the topic is, a girlfriend's guide to infertility, and we're going to really be focusing on marriage, because what can our girlfriends talk to us better about than how to maintain and keep a healthy marriage when you're going through infertility. I love this topic, and I think you will as well. This show is brought to you by Creating a Family. We are the National Infertility Education and Support Nonprofit, and we are brought to you by the generous support of Ferring Pharmaceutical. Ferring has a free program they want you to know about. It's called My Fertility Navigator. This program offers free one-on-one support for women who are trying to get pregnant unsuccessfully and are not sure of their next step. Once you enroll, you have to enroll, and once you enroll in My Fertility Navigator, you will receive a personalized guide, and this will be a live person who's going to be giving you information about fertility in general, infertility in general, including lists of nearby fertility centers, information on the finances and how to pay for infertility treatment, and things such as that. Their site has been recently updated, and you can check it out at myfertilitynav.com. Please pop over there and check it out and let us know what you think. This show, in addition to being underwritten by Ferring Pharmaceutical, is also brought to you by the generous support of our partners. And these are organizations who believe in our mission of providing unbiased, medically accurate information to the patient community. One such partner is Cooper Genomics. They are a reproductive genetic testing laboratory, and they focus on providing genetic tests and services for every step along your fertility journey. They can offer carrier screening, PGS, PGD, and some non-invasive prenatal screenings as well for individual and couples. And if you're planning your family or pursuing IVF, or even if you're early in your pregnancy, they've got tests that are applicable. Cooper Genomics is also proud to provide comprehensive genetic counseling to their patients. And as you know, if you've listened to this show very much, counseling, having a genetic counselor who can talk to you about the results that you get is absolutely crucial and something that we need to make sure we focus on. All right, today we're going to be talking about girlfriends and our girlfriends will be talking to us about infertility and the diagnosis, the emotions, a lot about the emotions, as well as our marriage and how infertility and the treatment thereof can affect our marriage. Our guest today is an author, Kristen Magnacca. She is the author of 2 books, Love and Infertility, as well as Girlfriend to Girlfriend, a Fertility Companion. The books are fun. They're entertaining. As fun as the topic will allow, let's put it that way. But it's definitely entertaining, and it keeps you involved. This is a re-air of a show that we did a number of years ago, and we've not touched on this topic, and quite frankly, Love and Infertility is still just a really strong book on this subject, so we thought we would re-air the show, and we hope that you find it as interesting now and as supportive and informational now as it was a number of years ago. Enjoy. Welcome, Kristen, to Creating a Family.
Hi, Dawn. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being asked to be part of your wonderful show.
When we talk to someone about infertility, I think it helps to kind of give the crib note version of their journey. So give us some perspective. What was your infertility journey?
Well, my husband and I, we thought, just like probably everybody listening, thought, we had the idea that we wanted to start creating our family, and we really believed like the next moment we would be pregnant. And unfortunately, that just did not happen. At the time, I had my own preschool, and I was caring for 51 children a day. So from the age of 3 months to 7, I had, all these babies around me. And it never really dawned on me that when, it was my turn to start creating our family, that it just wouldn't happen. And so
you were swimming in children.
I was literally, water everywhere, and watching watching these families come and go and then going on their second child, and we were still just struggling. And we decided that I would move closer to my husband. His business was in the Boston area, so I sold my preschool and thinking that, any month now. And then that time just ticked away, and it was 3 years, and we still didn't have our baby. So we were diagnosed with both male and female factor, and we both had to have surgery, and we started the IUI treatments, and we got that call that everybody longs for, that we had a positive pregnancy test, and that unbelievable joy that we got crashed into just despair when the day before Thanksgiving, 12 years ago now, they took me away in the ambulance because it was an ectopic pregnancy, which at that time I had no clue what a possible, what is this creature, this ectopic pregnancy. And I think that's the turning point in our whole journey, that the bottom just fell out because they looked at Mark and said, this might not turn out the way that you think. And he, at the moment, was thinking about, our baby, and they said, no, your wife is really in critical condition. And that was just the flashpoint that we decided, we were like the cobblers with holes in our shoes, because during the day we were working together helping amazing Fortune 500 companies achieve goals that they thought were unachievable. And at night we would come home and just wallow in this despair. And then we decided that we would use some of the strategies we used during the day in our personal life. And somehow or other we had been using those, but through this whole fog of infertility, they fell away. And so
I think that's so easy to happen because you don't often face this degree of pain and this degree of hardship. And so when you're going through it, your survival, a lot of times you do let go of the things that are most important.
Correct. And you know what? That commonality, in my experience now, I've had the privilege to work with women and couples and men going through, this journey for over a decade now. And it is in very, very many incidents the first marital crisis that you face. And talk about a crisis. It affects spirituality, your relationship, your identity, your family relationships. You talked about that in your open, about how many aspects of our lives are touched by this. And it's almost like the fates are saying, okay, this is it. What are you made of? What are you going to do to get through this? And, that's exactly what happened with Mark and I. It really pushed us to the brink. And
I think it does for a lot of people. And I think you're so right that for many of us, it is the first marital crisis. And it affects our dreams. It affects our presence as well, of course, but it also affects how we view the future. One of the things that you talked about in Love and Infertility was the need to develop a fertility game plan. And I talk with that about people as well. And obviously most people won't get to the point where they're thinking about a fertility game plan without having already tried the romantic evening approach for quite a while.
Right.
And so one of the things you and I both encourage people to think about, and think about it at the beginning, is how far up what I call the infertility ladder they're willing to go. Why do you think that's so important to do?
I think that is probably the most important strategy or exercise that you and your partner could do. I want to back up a little bit. When I mentioned to you that we lived and drinked our philosophy on life about, really, thinking clearly what you want, envisioning that, and then taking the action steps to do this. And then this crisis comes, and you're like, well, okay, I'm doing that, and it's not working.
Right.
And so the fertility game plan for us was really having a conversation that you really don't know what you're talking about. Basically, it's almost like you're speaking in Spanish to each other, because our crisis started right when we had an ectopic pregnancy. And you, for me, and I think for others, you come from a place that you never had a conversation with your mother or father that they said, okay, if you can't have babies, you need to go not to your OBGYN, but go right to a reproductive endocrinologist, because that's what that doctor does every day. Every day he's focused on getting women pregnant. And
I talk to people and I tell them that it's, if you've been trying for a year, and we go through the typical things depending on your age, but don't then go to your OBGYN. If you've been trying for a year, go ahead and ratchet it up pretty quick and get to a reproductive endocrinologist.
Right, and that's part of what I know now that I wish I knew then. That's basically my philosophy when I coach people, and also what I write about. It's almost giving a hand up to someone when you're climbing this mountain, and we're up on a little bit higher, so we can reach down and offer a hand up.
Mm-hmm.
So the fertility game plan is something to start a conversation about. And I have some questions in my book that, what are you willing to do emotionally, physically, spiritually, and financially? What are your limits? What do you feel comfortable with? And, talk about, Mark and I both, we had male and female factor. So we had to have conversations around, are you willing to use donor sperm? Are you willing to use donor eggs? Now, how an unbelievably uncomfortable conversation to have. But if you can do it in a manner that's non-threatening for each other, then you know how you can approach this. And why I feel that the fertility game plan is so important is because that was that one piece of paper that empowered us to the point of shifting. And the shift occurred that instead of being reactionary to our situation, we were proactive. And when I say reactionary, I would wait for the call from the clinic. Okay, your numbers didn't go up and you need to take blah, 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 blah. And it was all a knee-jerk fight and flight situation for me. And then when we created our fertility game plan, and granted, it was a little bit of hindsight because we already had 3 IUIs. But when we created that, it was really, how can we empower each other? How can we empower our marriage? How can we empower ourselves to move through this? And how do you connect to that faith? Because faith for me is what pulled me through. I was so angry at the world, angry at God for, having us had that brief moment of glory and joy and then have it be taken away in such an abrupt manner. And it really challenged me. How do I connect to my spirituality, and how do I create that center that I call everyday certainty? Because our crisis came through infertility, but other people have crisis come through a different way. We had loss, and we had a bumpy, terrible journey. And that's what our movie, our life movie presented it to. But I think if you create a plan, and it has to be a beginning date and an ending date, for me, I needed to do that because that helped me remind myself that there was a beginning, a middle, and an end. Mm-hmm. And I didn't lavish in those feelings like, oh, my God, this is going to be forever, because it wasn't going to be forever. We committed that we would do 3 IUIs, we would do an IVF, and then we would look into adoption, because what had happened was the shift from I wanted to be pregnant to I wanted to be a mom. Mm-hmm. And that's an organic cycle that has to happen. And maybe it doesn't happen, but that's what happened for me. So I think the fertility game plan is really something to have everybody on the same sheet of music, including your reproductive endocrinologist and your fertility team, your clinic team.
Exactly, because you need to share your plan with your consultants, with your team. And money is a factor. You've got to look at your money. You've got to look at your insurance. You also need information from your doctor,
right?
Of what, not just your diagnosis, but your odds of success on
right.
each of these different things. And I see a lot of people who spend way too much time at the IUI stage, most
right.
likely, because they haven't simply given it any thought. Their doctor would not have encouraged or discouraged it. They just simply haven't discussed with the doctor, okay,
right.
how many should we do before we then start stepping up the ladder?
And Dawn, those are questions that you don't really know to ask. Those are. I was so blessed to have met a woman who was a little ahead of me, and we became instant friends through the waiting room in the clinic. But and that's why Girlfriend to Girlfriend, a fertility companion came along, because it at that time, 12 years ago, which is a total different era for fertility treatment. you didn't know what to ask. You didn't know
Yeah.
where you can connect. You didn't, you were actually, for me, I'm speaking for myself, it was just a different time then. And even though I think things have changed so much because there's such great support, like your website and my website and Resolve and all, AFA and all those other great industries and Google and all this great stuff, it's still the same process. It's still the same emotions for similar emotions for the women that I'm speaking to that are just starting off. So
in some ways, they're almost cursed by too much information. There's so much information out there, but so often it's not complete. It doesn't address all the issues you have to think about. But there's so much to think about, really.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I'm
sorry. So the fertility game plan for me was just a piece of paper that was so empowering, and I actually kept it with me. I kept it in my pocketbook, and every time we went to the doctors, for the clinic or for a follow-up or whatever, I had it with me, and it was just something to give back the control in the whole scheme of feeling out of control.
Yeah. Something you talk about is the need to maintain balance throughout the whole infertility process. And it's healthy for you personally, but it's also healthy for your relationship. But it seems to me that obsession is more often the first response to trying to get pregnant, and obsession is the opposite of balance. But it also feels like if you have to be obsessed with the idea of pregnancy to get pregnant. Is there any way out of this conundrum? It seems like we're in a catch-22 here.
Doesn't it seem that? I was just actually talking to a client yesterday who is doing such an amazing job at that, having her fertility game plan and having her, modality that she uses for her mind, body, and soul, and having her financials. It's just so much, and it overlaps and intertwines in every part of your life. And then yesterday she got news that her cycle didn't work, and she just had a moment. She's just having a moment. And I think what happens for us when we get thrown totally out of balance is that you have this over sense of trying so hard to hold yourself together, and then just everything, the floodgates break open, and you just have those moments. And for me, it's okay. I think that is just part of it. It's you got to have those moments and get it out any way that you can. If it's writing in your journal or walking fastly for an hour or screaming at the top of your lungs, because the balance part, if you make a list of everything that you do every day, regardless, not including infertility treatments or fertility treatments, you do a tremendous amount of activities every day, and then add on, I call it the full-time job of fertility. How can you not feel out of balance or obsessed about it? Because it's your mind, body, and soul. Every part of you is engaged in this. And I think for me, when I have private consultations or speak to clients, it's really about creating that system. And what's so powerful, Dawn, that it's the law of gratitude. I feel that if even in those dark days when I only could come up with one thing I was so profoundly grateful for, and that was okay, that was perfectly fine, but I feel like the law of gratitude, just creating 10 things that you're grateful for each day, or maybe it's 2 things, or whatever you can come up with, that has such a profound chemical change in your body that it changes your focus to what you have right now, not what is lacking. And it's so amazing that my husband and I just watched It's a Wonderful Life the other day, part of our Christmas, time ritual. And it was such a great reminder that sometimes we get so blinded about every day what we do and what we give to others, that it just takes that one few moments to reframe yourself about what you do have to be grateful for. And I know, and in no way am I discouraging people from having those moments, because God knows we all need to have that release, that toxic energy release. But if you kind of create a system of creating for what you are grateful for right at this current moment, not thinking about tomorrow or not thinking about the past, but just right at this moment what you're grateful for. And you know what? You and I briefly talked about the snow that we had in the last few days, and I was so grateful we had a generator because we were without power. And as crazy as that sounds, the blizzard was treacherous here on Cape Cod. But just to have that generator shifted everything, instead of walking around saying, oh, my God, we're going to lose everything in the refrigerator or whatever, because we were out for about, 24 hours without electricity, but we had our generator. And as silly as that sounds, Dawn, if you could find that little speck of light in the crisis, it does change your whole chemical makeup. It does. It has profound changes.
Here we have a question from Ruth Ann. Actually, it was a long question, so I'm breaking it into two different parts. She says, we've been trying to conceive for 1.5 years. I have changed my lifestyle to a healthy lifestyle so that my body will be the perfect environment for a baby. But living with these changes is like a constant reminder that I'm not pregnant and I'm getting tired. I've given up coffee and wine and hot tubs and other things as well. But each time I pass up a cup of coffee or a glass of wine with dinner, I'm reminded that I am still trying and that I have been at this for a while. And each time I feel extra sorry for myself for having to forego something that I love and for not being pregnant. Any suggestions for that's the first part of Ruth Ann's question.
Isn't that just, I remember cursing the fact I had to have, decaffeinated tea because I didn't forego the tea. I would have the decaf. And I remember saying terrible things in my head about other people who, I talk about the group in my book, the people who went out and had a amazing night and, drank too much and then the next morning woke up pregnant. I remember the feelings of just, being angry and envious of those people who didn't have to make those changes. And you know what, Dawn? I have you ever read Lance Armstrong's book, It's Not About the Bike?
Yes.
And there's one part in that book that actually was like a switch for me, because in his book he talked about the line, I can't really quote it directly, but he said cancer basically did wonders for him and that he would never change it because it helped him look at himself and, it actually did wonders. And part of the reframing, to go back to that, because I completely understand what Ruth Ann, that was the question from Ruth Ann, right? Mm-hmm, right? I completely understand that, because I would say terrible things like people on drugs can get pregnant, but I can't have a caffeinated cup of coffee. That whole train of thought into that really negative land. But then I started asking myself, what is the wonder, that this is creating in me, and what is this doing for me? I would journal that. What have I learned about myself that will help me to serve others in a more profound way? In that instant that you feel that you don't have what you need and that you feel that you have to go without, I mean, I completely understand not connecting with the gratitude or what you're learning about yourself. But I think if I could just say again that it's okay to feel that. It's okay to resent the fact that you have to give something up to move through this. And then the other part of me is like, well, go ahead and treat yourself to something that you can have and make that your indulgence. I'll have to tell you what I did, and I still do this to the day. I have decaffeinated coffee, and I got myself a $15.99 coffee milk frother. And as silly as this sounds, Dawn, I heat my milk up in my microwave for a minute, and I froth it, and then I have decaffeinated coffee. And sometimes I put a little regular in it. And every morning I treat myself to that. So what I say to people is create that indulgence that you don't feel like you're lacking.
I would also suggest talking with your reproductive endocrinologist and seeing if she or he thinks that a cup of coffee or a glass of wine periodically is really going to impact your odds.
Right.
I think I would ask that question specifically, and if so, then yes, indeed, it's certainly worthwhile giving it up.
Right.
But I'm not sure that's going to be the answer you hear, so I think that it might be. I think sometimes we think that we have to do something dramatic.
Right. Right. And
to
you know
even
what?
conceive, because we aren't doing it. We haven't conceived, therefore we've got to do something massive. Now, I'm assuming that she's not overindulging in either of those.
Right. And you know what, Dawn? For me, those are the things I can control. Like,
exactly.
I could control how much tea I drank and not having alcohol. And for me, that became kind of what would make me feel, okay, I'm doing everything possibly I can.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then on those
I'm in
moments,
control. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then on the moments that you feel, oh my God, I can't even have a cup of coffee and I'm not pregnant, that just gets piled into the, what you're looking at the moment. And I completely get that, because I was eating organic food and having, drinking my water and, doing all those things that I could control to help myself through that.
And sometimes that's a powerful thing, is to do the things that you can, because it makes you feel like you are being proactive. And Ruth Ann's going to have to figure out that whether it's effective as a tool for her to make her feel like she is doing something, or if it is a hindrance, and she's going to have to figure, that.
Right. Or just go with those feelings at that moment that, okay, I have some anger around the fact that I feel like I'm sacrificing for this and it's just not happening.
Yeah.
And then ask yourself the question, what are you learning about yourself right at this moment?
Mm-hmm. Here's the second part to her question.
Okay.
My husband told me last week that he's tired of trying and he's tired of me being sad. He's ready to stop. Being a mom is all I've ever wanted, but being a dad is something he'd like, but it's not the only thing he wants. I was devastated when he told me that, and I don't know what to do with it. Now, she did not specifically say it, but I would imagine that in addition to being devastated, Ruth Ann was also probably angry,
right,
as well. That would be an emotion that could often follow that discussion. Any suggestions with that second part?
Well, I that kind of goes back. It does go back to the fertility game plan, and let me tell you why. For Mark and I, guys really are conditioned to fix things. That's how their brains work. Tell them a problem and they'll fix it. And for Mark, it was really, really a changing experience for him just to have to listen to what was going on and not fix it. I talk about that strategy from in the book, ducking and dodging, and really letting things go by. And I think what ended up happening for Mark and I was just the timing thing. And what we did was we incorporated breaks in between our cycles. And this is such a hot spot when I bring this up to my clients and the people in my workshops, because I went from, no, I got to do it now. I'm cycling. I have to do the cycle next right away. We're not waiting. Time is ticking away, and let's go. Let's get this done. Kind of.
My eggs are getting older.
What do you mean? I can't take a break. If we take a break, what does that mean? And when will I have the baby? And then it was like the V8 moment, dunk. Because there was Mark in this situation and Kristen in this situation, but you know what else? It was the sacred space between us, our relationship. And what happens is that the negotiations or compromise comes in. And for me and for Mark, because that's a similar conversation that we had in our house, and also what I hear from other people, is the timing thing. You need to take a break. You need to take a break from the situation and pour 100% into your relationship and listen to each other. And it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have another cycle. What it means is, I hear fatigue in that little blib that you read me from the husband. And I feel his frustration, and part of me was blinded to that in Mark when we were going through it. So I am a huge advocate of taking a break. And talking about how that would be for each other and what you were going to do during that month. And think about it this way, Dawn. This struck me. And the only mulligan, the only thing that I wish I could go back and do over is have those moments alone with Mark. Because what you don't think about is right now you're a family of 2. And then when you create your family of 3, even if it's from adoption or biologically or, being a foster parent, because some of my clients create their family through that, you're never going to get that time back that it was just you and your husband. And I think about that now and look back in hindsight by, my goodness, we really lost some opportunities to create moments.
Yeah, it's so hard, though. Yes, you're exactly right. And the other thing is you recommend keeping the romance in your relationship when lovemaking is turned into nothing but baby making.
Right.
It's easy to see each other as the necessary parts for creating the baby, him being the sperm manufacturer and you being the baby owner.
Right.
That it's lovemaking becomes work. So what suggestions do you have? Because that's an important part of a relationship.
It is. And, I think two things that I can offer from love and infertility is really when we hit that really dire spot in our marriage that I was almost to the point of thinking our marriage wasn't going to survive after we lost the baby. We did the honey-do list. That's what I called it, for
I love that. Yeah, tell them about it.
And what had happened was we were in counseling, and really we were just, falling apart. We were just falling apart. And at the time, I didn't realize how my depression about this, was so toxic to Mark in a way that he didn't know how to fix it. So one morning I woke up and I was like, oh, my Lord, we're losing each other to this. I'm gonna lose my marriage. And I got a color. I'm a 3x5 card queen. I love those because it keeps me organized. But I grabbed a card and I wrote 3 things down that I needed from Mark. And I wrote our wedding vows on the back, and I made a cup of coffee for both of us, and I brought him a cup of coffee, and I handed him a blank index card, and I said, could you please do me a favor and write down 3 things that you would need from me today? Because, just like Ruth Ann mentioned in her question, we're so thinking that the other person should respond to the situation in the way we are that we forget that person is interpreting their part of this whole journey in their unique personal way. And so when I asked Mark to write down 3 things he needed from me, and it was, simple things that we just didn't do anymore. He wanted me to greet him upon coming home. And to be honest with you, Dawn, I wasn't doing that. I wasn't even saying hello to Mark when he came home. It was kind of like, oh, boy, he's back. Here you are. And part of me wasn't doing it because I knew I would irk him. And that's terrible. And the other part was, the other one was listen to him with interest, about his day, because we fell into this place of not even sharing with each other because it was all about what we didn't have. It was all about the loss. It was all about, how come this didn't happen for us? And it's been such a long time. And, I was broken. And then the third one killed me. And I will remember this to the day I take my last breath, is Mark asked me to remind him why I married him. And I think that speaks to just being mindful and aware of what nurturing your relationship takes. And, now when I think back about it, if I was that little spirit baby flying around Mark and I wouldn't want to move in to that house because there was such discord and such disconnect and such sorrow and grief. And I'm not saying that wasn't right or appropriate feelings. I'm saying that if you shift it again to be proactive and use a 3x5 card and write down what you need from that, your partner every day, that takes the mind reading part. Because, Dawn, you know what I thought? I thought Mark knew what I wanted. In actuality, I didn't know what he needed, and he didn't know what I needed. And how amazing of a gift if you just simply jot down what you need. I needed Mark to call me 3 times a day just to let me know he was thinking about me. I needed him to have dinner with me and sit and have a conversation. And I needed him and I to go to bed together. And that talks about how the whole shift in your sexuality is a whole shift in your sexual, romantic, physical relationship takes over for fertility. Because, we weren't going to bed together because we couldn't try to have a baby. So why would we go to bed together? And that it's just, talking about it now, it just sounds crazy, but that's where we were.
Yeah. Have you read the book? I think it's The Language of Love, and different people have a different language with how they, what it means to be loved.
Right.
Some people need to be greeted at the end of the day and listened to. For other people, they need to be held.
Held,
they need cuddling.
right.
There's different people.
There's actually, sorry, I'm to interrupt you. Go ahead, keep going.
No, there's different people need different things, and we assume that everybody is going to be like us.
Right.
I need this, therefore you're going to need this, because, we're both human beings, but that's just not how we're wired.
No, you know what I have a test in Love and Infertility about that. It's called VAK, because you know what that really truly is how you communicate to yourself. Is how you need your partner to communicate to you. And visual, kinesthetic, or auditory, and you're dead on, because a visual person usually needs to see something. So like I needed to see that written down for Mark. And an auditory person can just be told, I love you. And that's all they need. And a kinesthetic person or a feeling person needs to be held or touched and or just feel that closeness. And it's so amazing that it was mind-boggling to Mark and I that we were using that test in our everyday lives, but never took it for each other and said, okay, this is my combination. I was a visual, auditory, kinesthetic person, so I needed to see something from him, and then I needed to hear it. And then, the whole touchy-feeling person, I'm not a big public display of affection person, that was kind of on the back burner, but it doesn't mean I don't need that. It just means if he needed to know the combination, it was visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And actually, if your listeners would want to, ping me an email, visit my website, I'd be happy to send them that test from the book, because it is an eye-opener, Dawn, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I took it, and I'm planning on reading it to my husband as well as my kids, and I'm curious to see what they are. I would assume I would know, but I'm not sure I do.
I know, and you assume that if, like, I fall in the trap of just speaking, but a truly profound kinesthetic person, which for me, my son is truly kinesthetic. He breathes, and it takes him a little while to digest what you're saying to them. So if you're a visual person and you're quick and you're zipping around the house saying, pick that up and we'll get your coat, let's go, they're really on just feeling how it's going to feel to pick up your coat, So, and if you understand that, the frustration level with the very important people in your life kind of goes, oh, okay, I get it. I got to slow my words down because he's truly feeling the words before he can act. Or an auditory person, don't show them anything, just speak to them. That's just really general, but that kind of gives you a feeling, and it's such an amazing experience to be in a room full of people taking this test, and then having them, oh my gosh, I can see that my husband's very kinesthetic or an auditory person. It's almost like something somebody should have told us when we were growing up.
Okay, let's talk about scheduled sex, which is a part of trying to conceive. Is it possible to schedule romance and spontaneity, or do you just need to do it when you need to do it, and then in the non-fertile times of the month plan on having your spontaneity and romance?
Well, I think they're not one without the other. I think, there's unitary sex that you have to get it done to get it over with, but there's also little things that you can do to change that feeling about it. That there's that movie, She's Having My Baby with Kevin Bacon, and at the point that they're trying to have a baby, she goes, you can watch TV too if you want. I think it's just creating the ground rules for both of you. And for Mark and I'll be very honest with you. I mean, we knew there were certain times that we just had to, do what we needed to do. But we committed to each other that once a month we would have a romantic date, that we did not talk about our fertility issues. And as many times that I would be getting ready to go out with Mark and trying to make it a special thing and not really feeling it, really not truly feeling that, put the red dress on and the lipstick and doodle myself up to go out to dinner and, make a special moment, I would say, okay, this is what we need together. This is what Mark needs right now. And really talk to your spouse about what he needs. Maybe it's, I need 3 quickies just to feel good about myself. Then, compromise about that. And it is, right? That's part of the mechanics of creating your family, but there is another system that you can create around that meets your needs in a different way.
Here's an email we got that's similar to that. This is from Susanna. I don't have a question, but I'd like to share something that has really worked for my husband and I on this very long, trying process to become parents. We schedule one night a week that we either go out or do something fun at home that we don't talk about or even think about infertility or adoption. We call it our Remember Why We Married Each Other night. And it is totally about what we want. I recommend it. It has made this whole process bearable. By the way, we are matched with a wonderful birth mom who is due in February. We think it's a boy.
Oh, isn't that a beautiful? That's a beautiful email. That's just amazing.
And I think that's what you're talking about.
You know what? It is exactly that. And Dawn, this is the other trick that I did, and I write about that in Love and Infertility. Is that I took my journal and I wrote that moment. I wrote about that moment that I knew Mark was my guy. I was so detailed in that memory of, when I opened the door and he was standing there with flowers, and just the feeling I got and what I smelled and what it looked like and what I heard, using all that VAK language out of the book that we talked about, visual and auditory kinesthetic. And I wrote that in my journal. And on those on those days that you just like, oh God, please God, I would take that part of my journal out and reread it and connect to those loving feelings that when we were young and crazy in love, and that moment, and bring me back to that moment. And it goes back to reframing and having your brain connect to those positive memories and override the connections of the not so positive. And I've been an advocate of that strategy now for a while, and I get emails back from women who talk about that, and even husbands, write about that moment and what you remember about it. And
I would also suggest perhaps sharing that with your spouse.
Well, that's the other part about it. You can do it together and then swap, stories or swap however you write it, and then talk about it. And I think it's just one more tool to have in your toolkit to connect to those romantic feelings and to bring you back there, to the place of, the take your breath away of like, oh, he's my guy, So
yeah, you're listening to Creating a Family. Talk about infertility and adoption. Today's show is about saving your sanity in marriage while trying to have a baby. Our guest is Kristen Magnacca. She is the author of Love and Infertility. Kristen, we got an email question asking us to address infidelity as it may relate to the challenges presented by infertility. Well, let me first give the standard caveat here. Neither Kristen nor I are psychologists nor doctors in this area, so what we are going to say will just be our opinions. But it's an interesting question because, as we talked about at the beginning, infertility is a huge challenge and a huge stress. Yeah, have you seen this to be much of a problem?
I have only had one experience with one woman that I was coaching that unfortunately infidelity played a part in her a journey to create her family and resulted in them not being together anymore. But she continued on and had a child of her own, and being part of that by just hearing her story was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And the only way I felt that I was able to address it is really communication and communicating to each other what you truly need. And who knows if in that situation, if that was already happening within the marriage and this crisis brought it to the forefront, or, I never really asked the details of it. But it goes back to really bringing your awareness to not only your feelings and your husband's feelings, but also what you need to sustain your relationship between you.
I'm focusing on the sustaining and the nurturing of the relationship. Now, it's hard to address it once an infidelity has already occurred. That's a whole nother thing.
Right.
Or it seems that way to me. But so often I see that couples, either couples who are going through infertility or even new parents or old parents, for that matter, stop focusing on nurturing that relationship and the suggestions we've already talked about, things of ways of finding out what your spouse needs to make him feel special. And so often it's easy things that we can do that, but it's a whole other thing if the infidelity is already taking place. I mean, gosh knows, infertility is extraordinarily stressful and can, but on the other hand, life is stressful. If not infertility, there's going to be other things that come up. Heaven forbid that you have a child that's quite ill, or you get fired, or there are a lot of really bad things that can happen, and it's hard to know where to go with this to be helpful, because without a doubt it is a very stressful situation. I would hope that the questioner is seeking therapy, if in fact it's happened too. That may be just a general question, not as it relates to them particularly.
Right.
Yeah. When you say communication, in what way, other than in what we just spoke of in the nurturing?
I think one of the clear ways for Mark and I was really to do our dreams list, and that's actually the first chapter in the book, because it is so profound and so magical when you truly figure out what you need, and so part of, and I'm just trying to tie that into infidelity, is part of that woman deciding truly what she desires at that moment, and
other than to kill them, maybe.
Right, other than to kill them, because you can't change someone else. You can only change yourself. And if I can't even imagine, if that was brought to me, I can't even imagine, the anger and the despair and the violation. You think about Tiger Woods and what's going on in the media about that. But I think just to flip it around is to really be solid in what you want. And I think, not to change the subject, but in a way it's going to change the subject a little bit, Dawn, is that it's so important for women in general to be clear about what are they trying to create and what are they giving birth to. And I'm not talking about a baby. I'm not, right at this moment I'm not. But I think to create a system that you connect to what your desires are. And the dreams list is really sitting for a moment and asking yourself this question: if I had unlimited time, talent, and support from my family and friends, here's a list of things I would do with my life. And I think if you live from your center and live what your true purpose is here and what fills you up spiritually, then you are so grounded, mind, body, and soul-wise, that fertility will rock your world, but not rock your center, if that makes sense at all. And that's only speaking from years of work and years of being very curious about myself and how I react to things and how can I make myself better. But it starts with really being crystal clear on your dreams list and then creating your goals of what you really are hoping will happen. And I feel very badly for that person who wrote in that, their life crisis is not only bringing them, a fertility challenge, but also a marital crisis. So, and maybe my answer of the dreams list might sound like, yeah, right, that's not going to help me right now. But I feel like if you focus on,
it may help center.
Center yourself on what you want, not necessarily, react to what's going on.
Okay, it seems appropriate since this is the holiday season, and we're going to everybody will be out there seeing relatives and friends. Let's talk about what you call the elevator speech. And then I want to move into giving specific examples, because I think sometimes that's helpful. But go ahead. Tell me what you mean by the elevator speech.
Well, the elevator speech in business is really a clear, concise script that you use to answer the question about what you do, what you do in the world. And what had happened was actually it was Christmas, and Mark and I had to attend. It was one of those mandatory. We had to go to Mark's business Christmas party, and to be honest with you, Dawn, moments before we walked out the door, we got the call from the clinic saying that we had male factor, and that Mark would probably need surgery to correct this. So we really, got off the phone, were dressed to go, and, got in the car to go to this party. And when we got there, we were a little bit behind everybody. And to be honest with you, people were already inebriated. And we sat down at this table, and this man across the table shouted to Mark, "When are you selfish yuppies going to stop only thinking of yourselves and, start creating your family?" And I had my little butter knife in my hand, and Mark put his hand on my hand because I was like, I was going to stab him because I like.
Oh, take your selfish, blah blah blah. Yeah.
I know. So from the outside looking in on us, perception was like, well, here we were, two young women, a young woman, a young man, doing what we needed to do, and not thinking about creating a family, and we just got the words, and literally I laughed. I just got my coat and left because I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that, of course he was inebriated, but I can't believe he could be, that insensitive. And out of that came our standard reply to that, because there was too many times I was so afraid going into a social situation, the anticipation of that question. So do you have kids? Are you guys going to have kids? Or, it was the anticipation of the question, and also the question itself, that caused such a high anxiety level that we created elevator speeches. And, also because Mark was really, on pins and needles around me, because people would say what I thought would be stupid. Well, why don't you just adopt? Or what's the matter with you guys? You can't, you can't have kids? Or so we came up with scripts, and one of my favorites that I used over and over again, we have a whole team of experts working on that.
I think that's a really good one. Sometimes it depends on where you're at and how the question is phrased and the motivation behind the question or who's asking it. But often I suggest people think in terms of how they want to feel after the question is answered, and also how they want the other person to feel.
Right.
I mean, do you want to forestall the penetrating questions, or do you want to open up the possibility for discussion later?
Well, you know what, Dawn? When I first started creating him, I was really going for the juggler.
Yeah, sometimes you really, and sometimes you want to make the other person squirm and feel like they're being too nosy. But it helps to have some different pat answers that you've practiced that you can give depending on, I love that one. We have a whole team of experts working on it. That says a lot. It gives them an idea. It's giving them information. They know the answer, and at that point it also is pretty definitive and it's pretty firm so that they're going to hopefully back off. You could also, come up with a flippant answer. You could come up with an answer if somebody's being exceptionally rude, and it's nice knowing it and having practiced it if you want to make the other person feel like a jerk, that they are.
Right. Well, the three ways that I usually do it is direct, humor, and then the juggler one,
What was your juggler one?
Well, I remember Mark was so upset with me that night that, it was just like the perfect storm of things that could have gone wrong.
Yeah.
I had just lost a baby, and I had emergency surgery, and we actually had to go to a funeral. And unbeknownst to us, somebody else in our family had just started telling people they were pregnant, and they misunderstood and thought it was me. And so they walked over and said, "Oh, congratulations! We just heard about your pregnancy." And I just said, "Oh, no, I'm not the one that's pregnant. I'm the one they just filleted. If you want the one that's pregnant, she's over there." And Mark was like, "Kristen, I cannot believe you." And then I would just, I lost it. And that's when I came up with Babies Come When Babies Come. And then I also, terribly, one day someone said to me, "Well, why didn't you ever think about adoption?" And I said, "Well, didn't you ever think of a nose job?" And the woman was beautiful, but, it was just terrible, so I just stuck with, we have a whole team of experts working on that, because it was ugly some days,
Yeah.
But we would talk before we got to functions about, creating the plan around it. Are we staying for the whole thing, or are we only going for appetizers? Are we going to show up late and just go for desserts? And
having the secret line which says, "Okay, we're leaving now,"
right.
without saying, "Okay, we're leaving now."
Right. And ours was from Seinfeld. These pretzels are making me thirsty. And Mark would know, okay, get her coat. She's got to go. And sometimes I would do that in my mother's house. And it had no rhyme or reason where the wave of emotion would come. Being in my mom's house with my whole family, I would say, these pretzels are making me thirsty. And we would just have to leave. And I think to be empowered is to really know that you're perfectly fine doing what you need to do right now. And if that's not going, then don't go. Because I love this. I would say to myself, 10 years from now, it's really not going to matter if we go to this party. People probably would even forget that we didn't go. So that was what the disclaimer was. 10 years from now, it's not going to matter. It truly won't matter if we go to this Christmas party. And if you feel you can't go, don't go.
Right. Yeah, Mabel, I am such a believer in that. Give yourself permission to do what feels good to you. On the other hand, totally excluding yourself from all your social life is also not healthy. So,
right.
but each person has to figure out that balance for themselves.
You have to figure out what empowers you. So if it empowers you to go to appetizers and leave, then do that. If it empowers you to go and stay through dinner and leave before dessert, then do that. At the end of the day, what empowers you?
Exactly. I want to get to this next question because it's similar, I think, to something that you experience as well. This one's from Marisa. I am glad to see this topic for today's show. My husband and I are miles apart on the whole fertility plan. Once we started to really think about how far we'll go, we don't agree on much. I am very hesitant about all this technology, but there is nothing he wouldn't do as far as technology. We're taking the month of December off, but come January, we need a plan. So I think that you also experienced where you and Mark were on different levels of comfort with different levels of technology. How did you resolve it?
We were on total different opposite extremes. After, the ectopic pregnancy, and they said I had no tubal functioning, that the only way we could create a family biologically was through IVF. Mark was like, okay, let's get on the stick. Let's do an IVF. We could get this over with. Come on. We could have a baby. Let's go, 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 go. And for me, I was like, oh, I don't think spiritually, emotionally, and physically I'm up to this. So I started to embrace the alternative methods. I was doing yoga, and I was having cranial sacral therapy and acupuncture, and I was journaling, and for me that was how I found that center. Like that was how I approached it and found myself balanced. And Mark would do things like we would be on the beach and my phone would ring. It would be my reproductive endocrinologist. Hello, Kristen, you're not getting any younger. I was 40, 39. Let's go. I got your meds here. Let's go. You can do an IVF. And how we came to an understanding was that we disagreed on this, and that I would give myself a certain amount of time to do this way, and then agreed with Mark that we would enter back into doing an IVF. And for me, I said I needed 6 months. I truly needed 6 months just to keep on the path that I was on, which was embracing the holistic approach to it and creating balance that way for me. And to be honest with you, that was a lot of work, Dawn. You think in your head, well, a cycle's a lot of work. No. This other stuff was a ton of work. And you forget that. I am speaking to women who, are doing journaling and are going to yoga and incorporating all this stuff about, understanding themselves. That's a lot of work, man. You're doing a ton of work doing that. And so you're not doing nothing. And that's what I would say to Mark. You might think I'm doing nothing, but I'm really kind of pushing the ball along here in a different kind of way. So
and the other thing that I hear you saying is that you had a plan that you both agreed on, and you had a period of time that you had. That gave him permission to say, okay, there is an end to all this, in his opinion, malarkey, alternative BS, it's not going to work type of thing.
Right.
That gave him, even if he was just humoring you, it gave an ending. It also kept you moving and probably kept you motivated to to do everything you could during that 6-month period. Yeah.
And we agreed on it. It was actually December 31st. And this is actually our second fertility game plan for my daughter Grace. My son's 11 and my daughter is 6. 5-year span there. So we had first and second infertility issues. We had the whole gamut there.
Yeah.
And so really, I gave myself to December 31st, 2003. That that was it. And if we weren't pregnant that January, I was going 2002, I was going to start an IVF cycle. And it was amazing. It was amazing because we found out we were pregnant with Grace. My husband and I were just talking about this yesterday. We found out we were pregnant with Grace on December 28th, and it was 3 days before I started having to take the Lupron. Mm-hmm. So as crazy as that might sound, I really feel that it's so powerful when you write it down and write down your dreams and write down your goals and write down your fertility game plan, because magical things happen that you don't expect.
On that incredibly positive note, thank you, Kristen Magnacca, for being our guest today on Creating a Family.
Thank you so much, Dawn. I so appreciate it, and it was such a pleasure being with you for this hour.
Well, you're welcome. To get more information on Kristen or to buy her books, you can go to her website. Her website is her name, Kristen Magnacca, MAGNACCA.com. And by the way, you can buy her books there, and you can also find out more about her consulting. And she has autograph books if you would like to order them there. If you have found this show helpful, please post about it and link to it so others can listen as well. Thanks so much. See you next week.
Your hands were made for greatness. Mighty hands for painting, paneling, and clicking the Submit Order button on HomeDepot.com to get that duvet. And these Egyptian cotton towels delivered right to your door. Do more with decor at the Home Depot. Save up to 30% on select bedding and bath. Now at HomeDepot.com. More saving, more kinds of doing. Valid on select items online only. Free delivery on select items $45 or more. Enter promo code BEDBATH15 at purchase for an extra 15% off. Visit HomeDepot.com for more information.
Now at the Home Depot, save up to 35% off appliance special buys. Like the Samsung stainless steel side-by-side refrigerator, just $9.98. You save $300. It's big enough to hold 25 bags of groceries. Unload those, and if that makes you thirsty, you'll really love the external ice maker and water dispenser. Today is the day for doing. Spring Black Friday savings now at the Home Depot. More saving, more doing. U.S. only while supplies last. See store for details. Valid through April 17th.